Hello, and welcome to The Real Agent, where we pull back the curtain on all things real estate. We're your hosts, Christina, Mary Jo, and Murray. Today on the show, we have Deanna Stea, a partner at Dutton, the firm that specializes in all things litigation. Thanks for Deanna for being on the show today.
Thank you for having me, guys.
Amazing.
Yes. Very excited. Deanna is a longtime friend of ours and always the person that we call whenever we're having legal problems.
Well, it's not even legal problems. It's really about managing risk or even consulting. And I think real estate, similar to law, is probably one of the very few areas that is saturated, right? Yeah. So it's really about navigating and figuring out good people, good networking, and good work. And I think all those three elements go hand in hand. So I'm happy to be part of this because I know that you guys fit all those and check off all those T's.
Yeah, I have a question about that.
Do we have legal issues?
So we understand that like the bar is really low in real estate to get in. Like it's really like.
Oh, I'm glad you guys are saying that.
The bar, like it's but you said that it's saturated in law. How does that happen? Because it's like, it's not easy to become a lawyer.
Well, it is and it isn't, right? I mean, I think that for a long time, when Yellow Pages used to exist, right? I mean, and that's dating me right now. Everyone would laugh because if you looked up lawyers, you needed 4 Yellow Pages. I mean, there's stacks and stacks of books that would talk about directories for lawyers. So yeah, I mean, as long as you were a decent student and were able to go through the typical schooling, you could become a lawyer. Sure, it was not exactly easy, but if you knew how to manipulate the system like many other fields, you got a degree. If you came from a family where you had access to good referrals and references and the ability to get an apprenticeship or articling position, you had decent grades or great grades, you became a lawyer. If you weren't that great, but you had a lot of money, you went to England and got a degree. A lot of people would dispute that, but I mean, there's, listen, a lot of people rather than face reality stayed in school for a long time and became a lawyer. And just because you have a law degree doesn't mean you have to practice law, but it allows a lot of doors to be open. The funny thing is, I think when you talk to people, generally all the lawyer jokes come out. But yet when you need a lawyer...
I think the most jokes are about realtors and lawyers.
Well, yeah, and it's funny, right? Like everybody complains about the industry, mine and yours. But then when they need it, they're ready to call you any time of day, right? And then they want you. But not only do they want you, but they want to know at the end, while they have the answer, what the price is.
Well, or they want you for free.
Yeah.
They're like, hey, can you just answer all my questions and then I'll come back to you?
Yeah.
And we face the same thing.
Well, and it's funny. I mean, so schooling's a big part of it, but it's, it's refreshing to hear you guys say, yeah, there is a low bar to get into real estate. Because everyone I know in the last 10 years, especially the last 5 years, with the Toronto market being as hot as it has been, I mean, now I think we're in a very unique time. But aside from that, everyone that wanted to be someone became a real estate agent.
Or they just figured it's easy and they're like, I'm just going to go get my real estate license.
Oh, I'll make it even, easier for you. I mean, especially at the gym where I socialize quite a bit other than working. Everyone that could use Instagram and TikTok in a very savvy way all of a sudden became a real estate agent because they knew someone that was going to give them a hot property, and there it begins.
I think that's what we're seeing. Realtors now on TikTok, and they've just become movie stars.
Well,
like it's not about selling properties anymore. It's about, how cool is your reel.
Yeah, and as we were talking before we started today, it's about navigating through the internet. How do you navigate who's going to be there for you and what's real and what's not? And we've talked about this in the sense of I'm hoping that once we get through this, era of like crazy information, that it's going to come down to basics. Getting on the phone, getting a sense of real people and real information as opposed to seeing what we see on the internet, because it's not all real. It's not accurate. It's shiny and new. No one ever posts their failures. No one ever posts the hiccups. No one ever posts my clients yelling at me because they didn't get what they wanted at the price they wanted. So you have to navigate that. But how many people want to spend that type of time or investment doing that? They just want to click on a button and say who looks the best, who's doing it the best, who has the best advertising. Well, just because you see that doesn't mean they're the best.
Yeah.
And people are still figuring that out. And that, believe it or not, that happens in law. And I'm sure it happens in your industry, probably more than in law.
Yeah.
But there's challenges at every angle, not only with the people that we service in terms of the deals, but also within the industry. We're competing with colleagues because it's difficult to critique your own industry because you come under fire. right? So how do you set yourself
we
apart?
critique our industry all
Yeah.
the time.
Oh my God. I'm just finding it now because of it being a difficult market. You're really feeling the critiquing between agents or how we're dealing with each other now. It's like, it's,
But this is where the real agents stand out, and I'm sure lawyers as well. It's
Oh,
like
absolutely.
if you know your stuff, you've been at it for a long time, and you actually have negotiating skills. This is where you're going to benefit from this type of market.
But it's hard to decipher with all the smoke and mirrors, like Deanna
Well, that's
said.
what it is, right?
So and I was actually just talking to somebody today about this. Is you have to know the right questions to ask as a consumer. You have to look at the back end. You have to do your research. You have to talk to people. You can't just like follow whatever you're seeing online.
No.
It's referrals. You definitely don't want to be looking up Google and saying, who's the best.
No, but that's the easiest, right? And we've seen that because for a long time it was easy to get the work,
Yeah.
right? Now is a real test of
This is what
quality.
separates exactly professionals from people who just kind of jumped on the bandwagon.
So it's experience. I know that you guys have been in the game for how many years now?
We're 20,
20.
20. So about the
I'm at
same time.
13.
Yeah. But obviously we're in that industry before. So yeah, same here, like 23 years. And I think it really gets down to basics. Like people need to ask the right questions, but at the same time, they don't even know what questions to ask. So it's, people say, well, what sets you apart? I said, well, I pick up the phone still.
Yeah.
When I say that to some people, they look at me like I'm from Mars.
Yeah, that's true.
I'm like, pick up the phone.
Well, I pick up the phone. I just prefer to text first.
Yeah.
I didn't say
She's giving me side eye.
Yeah, pick up the phone and ask for, in terms of clients, I always say to people, ask around. What I say is what you get. I'm a straight shooter.
Yeah.
And I'm sure, having dealt with you guys before, you guys are the same. So if people have questions, the best thing to do is go through referrals. Ask those referrals. Ask those people that have dealt with you.
We were literally talking about this yesterday. We were just like, like that's just like the topic of the last couple of days.
Yeah. And I'm not talking about, I'm not talking about, what they say on the internet, 4-star review from so-and-so. That doesn't even exist. Doesn't even exist. Those are made up names,
Yeah.
right? People pay for that kind of advertising, right? People pay for likes. People pay for followers.
You see a lot of that in your business, I'm assuming.
Well, there was a time where when I first started practicing law, it was very frowned upon to advertise. And you were professional, right? Almost in a hoity-toity sense, but you really weren't supposed to advertise. It was frowned upon.
Yeah.
But guess where it started? The States, south of the border.
Right.
Because, there were, you saw the late night commercials, call so-and-so, don't pay a cent event,
Yeah.
right? It trickled down into, Ontario. And what I started to learn was people could buy patches, best in town, top law firm. These aren't real designations that are ever given out.
No, they're just made up.
They're just made up and paid for. You pay a royalty to some company that's designed the logo, and that's it, and away you go.
Funny enough, back in those days when I would see those ads, those are the lawyers I would not use.
No.
I just thought, wow, that's actually weird for a lawyer to be doing that, and I would go the other direction.
Yeah,
How
but
about the
now
ones on the back of a bus.
But it's access, right?
just,
Or the bus
to me,
stop. Right now, there is
What
a
about
market
the
for
realtors
that.
on the park
Yeah,
benches?
the park benches. But there is a market for that, and but you can't get away from it. You can't get away from the advertising. But what you can get away from is realizing that a lot of people are all talk. But you have to ask those questions, and you actually have to ask for a face-to-face meeting. These, Zoom meetings and texting protocols, and you have to have real-time meetings, face-to-face, in a boardroom. Give me some proof. Let me know what you're about. Let me know what you care about.
Especially when you're deciphering who you want to work with.
100%.
That's when it's really important to actually sit down and get a feel for the person.
Yeah. And in my business, people talk about costs. So you're right. It's not cheap. So let's meet. Let's have a real discussion. The same with you guys. You guys are selling people usually the most important asset in their lives, but yet they want to cheap it out.
Yeah.
You know what the analogy that I use for some of my clients is, what kind of surgeon do you want when you're going in for a surgery?
Yeah.
Do you want somebody who just started 2 years ago, who's done maybe 10 surgeries, maybe? Or do you want somebody who's been in it for a long time, is doing the research, is doing the on top of the education, on top of all the new, whatever is benefiting and improving, like all the new, the new technology or whatever it is that surgeons use.
Yeah.
It's different, right? Like we sell, We sell a lot of houses a year over many years. The experience of doing that is very different from somebody who's just started, like your aunt or your uncle, your cousin who just came into, real estate and now is.
When they use their aunt or their uncle or their cousin, all they're thinking about is how much money they're going to save on their commission.
But how much money are you leaving
Not,
on
not
how
the
much you're
actual
gonna-
experience of
Or it's
selling.
the offending part of it. Like, oh, I don't want to offend them.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, well,
Isn't it
what's
offensive?
what's more important? You
It's the
having
people pleasing. Yeah.
a good process and like feeling comfortable and feeling like something feels good to you when you're selling and buying and you're taken care of, or is it because your uncle's going to be upset with you and now
Yeah.
you're going to cause friction in the
Well,
family?
yeah, and I'm fine. Listen, I'm the first person to say if you can help a friend out or a family member out, sure, let's do it. But what happens when things don't go right?
That's the other
So
thing.
it's the standards, right? It's the quality control. What have they done to ensure that that property that they're either selling or looking at is free of issues, defects? Because that's when it comes to my plate,
And then
Yeah.
what happens when that relationship is now destroyed?
right?
Because, you put
Where's the
yourself in
recourse?
Yeah.
So as much as you were embarrassed not to use them for, pitching a property, well, how embarrassed are you going to be now when you have to say to them, oh, by the way, there's a problem here. I spoke to my lawyer. We may have to sue you. Do you have insurance?
Yeah. So why don't tell our listeners what type of litigation you do?
So anything that really gets insured, which is everything that has value, we defend, right? Or we bring an action for, depending on what side of the coin we're representing. So, I mainly deal with products liability, occupiers cases, construction deficiency. But, one big thing that has started to surface in the last, I would say, 8 years are construction deficiency and residential commercial issues involving latent and patent defects, right? So latent defects is a huge thing. And why I say it's particularly huge where you guys are concerned is because in those situations involving latent defects, you guys can be implicated in a lawsuit, as can some of the inspection companies that you guys hire. And people are probably thinking, well, what do you mean? Well, as you guys know, there can be electrical issues, flooding issues, fire safety issues, construction issues. Well, if you have somebody that's not familiar with how to assess a property that is, for example, going to be flipped recently, you know what to look for.
Yeah.
You know the game.
Yeah.
That's what it's about. You can walk into a room and figure out who's kind of had their their mark on this, and if your gut tells you something's off, right? Where does that experience come from?
Yeah.
It's the due diligence, and
Absolutely.
and that comes from real work, not I've been lucky enough to get some good referrals and make some great money in this game.
Exactly.
Yeah. And that's where being in the business for 22 years or whatever we've done helps, because we've been through these types of properties. You can recognize,
seen it.
okay, there's something going on here. We should dig a little bit deeper.
Yeah.
Especially
and we've
for the
renovated
flips.
our own properties and
Yeah.
invested in our own properties as well. So we understand the problems that you can run into and the things that you need.
Or when shit is hitting the fan, we know how to handle it.
Who to
Well,
call.
that's just it, right? And you have a good repertoire of
Yes.
companies that you work with,
Yeah.
right? Because you can get immediate contractors on site to see
Absolutely.
what's going on, or proper inspection companies that can do not your typical superficial inspection, but one that can really dig deep and figure out what's happened here, or and get your clients to either sign off on it or be aware of it or pivot and think about a different property. But in those cases where no one's disclosed anything, or it's turned on you suggesting that you haven't done your proper due diligence on behalf of the purchaser, you can be implicated. Or if you're representing a seller and you haven't done your due diligence to disclose certain things, you could be implicated, right? And then your reputation's on the line.
Yeah.
And that's where it gets a little bit tricky with buyer beware
Yeah.
versus, how much we have to disclose.
Well, that's
right?
just it. So the patent, obvious defects are those that are fairly obvious, right? But the latent ones are the ones that under a superficial inspection, you can't tell. So like what's behind the walls?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right? But if those sellers were fully aware of
That's the thing you have to prove.
faulty electrical, or, they've done a makeshift, patchwork to cover mold, or issues with the foundation. Where does that start? Is it the seller or the architect?
So
Or is it the builder? And you guys, I know, because I've had discussions with you, you have years in the business where you've heard certain names floated around the industry that when they're building something, or that architect's associated with something, or that pool guy's doing that pool, It's not always on the up and up, and we all know what that means.
Yeah.
Because if it can go up for that price, or it can go up that quickly, or they did construction during the winter when you know that things don't settle. People don't realize that.
Yeah. It's putting the pieces together, and that's where experience helps. Like,
Putting
like,
the pieces
okay.
together, especially in this market, because in Toronto, there are a lot of homes that are a huge price point that need work done to them, right? Or you're stepping into work that you can tell has been done. It's all superficial. It's all cosmetic.
What
but
do we
what's
call it?
under it?
Lipstick on a pig?
Yep.
Right, exactly. So, the problem is that a lot of pigs are coming out.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, when they're in there and they settle and they see the pig facing them in the, right there and then there, they're going to look for recourse. And that recourse is through the justice system, right? Well, I won't say justice system, but litigation. So they want money.
Yeah.
And you sue the brokerage, you sue the agents, you sue the inspectors, the architects, the contractors. And at some point you have to be called out.
And who pays for all those expenses?
Insurance. Right?
Wow.
Insurance. Everyone has their own insurance. Some things aren't covered though.
So I recently had an experience with a client who had sold her house.
Yeah.
She wasn't my client yet. She was referred to me by another client after this went down. So she sold her house, and before closing, the buyer backed out. Something must have happened.
Okay.
They backed out. And the brokerage that was representing her did not deposit the deposit.
Oh.
So they didn't clear it. They didn't deposit it. It was just like a personal check that they just held on to until closing. So now it doesn't close, and she has no deposit.
No recourse.
She has no recourse.
So what does she do? She has to sue the brokerage. She has to sue the buyer. She has to sue everybody.
She has to sue everybody.
And then how long does that take, though?
Yeah.
That's the
Litigation
discouraging part. Yeah.
Well, unfortunately, listen, it takes time.
Yeah.
Nothing.
Well, because that's something that happens that clients always talk about. Well, then we'll just sue, and we know that the litigation process takes really long.
Well, it
And
takes
that's what some
minimum
people-
of a year.
That's what some people bank on, though, the fact that the litigation is going to take a long time.
They run it out, right?
So how is the process on that? Like, what happens for to continue?
It's a backlog. It's a backlog with the courts. It's a backlog with people just being inundated with.
And so like the landlord and tenant board.
Oh, well, that's a whole other. I don't deal with them. But that's a whole other.
No, geez.
Beast. That's people.
I've helped out a few people in that, like as a personal favor. But that for me is just.
That's everything's in favor of the tenant. We can just leave it there.
Well, and it's not even that. You have to look at. It really is. The tribunal needs to do a bit more work. Like, I'm not going to slam them, but people tend to say it's kangaroo court. Like it's just ridiculous to get a hearing date. I heard recently is like 6-8 months down the line.
Yeah.
So in the meantime, a tenant is not paying you.
Yeah.
You're living for free.
You're living for free.
You have to be super, super cautious nowadays about your tenants and who you're putting in because you have to realize getting them out.
Well, it's a headache.
Yeah.
There's so
just
many optics, and often they don't pay you while that dispute is,
and they know that. Anybody who's done their research, they know that.
And they do damage to the property in the meantime. And the recourse is, quite frankly, very little. You're not getting
especially
anything
now
back.
with interest rates so high, you're already doubling your mortgage payments, and then if your tenant's not paying on top of that, that's you can lose your house.
Unfortunately, the system, I think, is one that really does benefit the habitual tenant that knows what they're doing. They know how to play the game.
And that's where references really, really matter, like real references, if you can.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
I
I
do some serious detective
Yeah,
work.
like there's some new like programs that are available that can like do even criminal record checks. That you
What's the name of that one you were just telling me about?
Single key.
Single key. Yeah.
We use that for every tenant. Every tenant now. Like if they send them something, like even if they give me their documents, I just put them through single key, and then single key will give me their background checks, if they anything about their credit, their work employment, they'll verify that as well. So
that's probably the most important, to make sure that they have a decent work record. But even in those circumstances, people have no shame.
Yeah.
People have no shame. Like, I had a friend that recently did not get paid for like close to 7 months. She's a single mom. She thought she was going to get some, decent income coming from this property. And, she, oddly enough, rented her place out to another single mother who had 2 children and had a great job. You think, ooh, the optics on this are fantastic. This woman didn't pay her at all and had no shame in it.
Wow, that's
So
really
we're dealing with
sad.
different people as well now. Like I think historically, and we've talked about this
The
historically.
entitlement is
Yeah.
it's
Well,
just
it's the
on another
entitlement, but I
level.
think that what's happened, especially during COVID and after COVID, people really walked away from, like growing up, I always thought that your work product was a reflection of your reputation and character.
Mm-hmm.
People don't believe that anymore. They're like,
Yeah.
you have no right to associate my character with my work ethic. Well, what else do I have to evaluate on? Like your looks? Like that's what they're like, okay, fine. Well, what else can I use? But that's the problem. People are okay being one mediocre and not being forthwith.
Yeah.
And that's what we're dealing with in every industry.
That's funny. Like, you're right. Every single industry doesn't matter. Everybody's having problems with finding good workers, good quality
Good
workers.
people.
Good
Yeah.
people. Yeah.
Good people that use
With
common
ethics and
sense,
morals.
with common sense, and that can just be sincere.
Mm-hmm.
Like everything is about the presentation, but then there's not even a conversation about the substance, and that applies to every industry
Mm-hmm.
in at least in the GTA.
We just had a deal. We sold a property and we got it for a really, like, it was listed at 1.1. We got it for 960, and which is great. It was a great deal,
Sure.
1,500 square feet. I think we bought it like 2 months ago, and it's literally 2 weeks before closing. I got a call from the agent telling me that they couldn't close because the seller didn't have enough money to close the deal. I've
Just
never
like that.
I've never had this happen to me ever in 22 years where the seller couldn't close because they undersold the property. Like, and to find out 2 weeks before, because we were actually selling my client's property as well.
Yeah.
So I'm like, so what do we do?
What happens now?
Yeah. So apparently the people had a second mortgage that nobody knew about. In my mind, I was like, why didn't the agent? The
Tell you.
agent should have known this. When you're
Yes.
underselling a property by 150,000,
You should know.
You should know that there's enough money to close the deal.
Well, that's their yeah. Like what's happening there?
How do you not know that? And now you wait until 2 weeks before closing when, like, let's say my client had sold his property, he'd be homeless.
Yeah.
Right. So
Yeah, well, luckily,
What's the recourse?
Exactly. Luckily, he still had that.
Well,
property.
that and there's an agent there that like, what are they doing?
what's the recourse though? Like these guys are bankrupt now. They're filing for
There's no
insolvency.
recourse, unfortunately, right?
Exactly.
Like that, your industry is really. You guys have like one regulatory body, really. And what's the recourse? A fine, a penalty, a suspension?
Well, you can't even sue them.
We're
if they've
talking
got
about real
nothing.
consequences, and that's the
Yeah.
issue, right? There's no real consequences for people that don't do their job anymore, right?
Yeah.
What's a slap on the wrist? What's a suspension? Big deal. Is that
Nobody- no-
published somewhere?
nobody
Like, can
cares.
someone Google that person's name and figure out that they did this? Because that's a big,
I think
mistake.
they can. If I think if you get a hearing
penalty,
date,
yeah.
a penalty or a fine, it will be, if you Google them, it will stay on there for 2
It will?
years. I believe so.
I
on
mean,
the
you
RICO
can fight
website.
those though. Like we've seen it where you can, if somebody puts a bad
Review?
review or
Oh, a
testimonial.
review is nothing. Because a
can-
review is, you can
review
bury it.
Yeah, like you can bury it, but no,
Yeah.
it's more like on RICO.
On RICO, they'll publish it. But does the end user know that?
No,
No.
Well, now they do.
Do they even
You
know
can
where
Google
to look?
it.
Yeah.
That's the thing.
Well, that's the
Yeah.
thing, right? But in the meantime, that brokerage is probably not advertising that, right? So, like I said, where's the due diligence on that agent?
And people get away with it because people don't want to put up with the hassle of having to wait and go through the court system and the money that they would have to pay to do that.
Well, it's also the misrepresentation that we were talking about, right? Like negligent misrepresentation of a property,
Yeah.
right? Like, what's the recourse for that? Like, unless you sue, what's the recourse?
Well, it's what is it? You have to prove that they were, they're in the wrong.
Well, but not only that, not that they were in the wrong, but that you relied upon them to make that decision to buy that property, right? But there are stages to that, right? And it happens all the time where people make everything look great, but bare bones, that's not, it's not an accurate assessment of the property.
Yeah, we used to do seller property information sheets, but I don't know if people are really doing
haven't
them
seen one in a
anymore.
long time.
And why would that
haven't seen one.
change? Like,
I would never
would
seen
that
one,
not be
hopefully.
something that would complete the package?
It should be done, to be honest, because if you want to make sure you're asking all the questions, they're on there.
Yeah.
Like there's some pretty deep questions that would really help, especially if you have a difficult property. I mean, we know because we've been doing it for so long, we ask a lot of those questions automatically anyway because
And
they're
that's
kind
for
of
and that's
ingrained.
for residential, right? So what happens with the commercial world? Because I know you guys do that as well. So are you finding any
The
differences?
commercial world is a bit of a wild, wild west situation.
Really?
Yeah, it's not mandated the same way as
No, I know it's whatever
Residential.
goes.
But back to the checklist, you don't have, like, there's nothing that says we have to fill it out. So representing a seller, we would never advise them to do that because they're giving so much information that they may or may not know, and they more chance to misrepresent themselves.
Yeah.
Got it.
So it's
Got it.
never gonna, why would you do it? It
Yeah.
just doesn't
You're
make
not
sense.
someone that documents everything you've done to your home in real time when you've done it. It's
Yeah.
like leaving you open for
A
Yeah.
lawsuit. Like if you
Lawsuit.
said, "Oh, I changed the furnace 10 years ago, but it was actually 15."
Do you guys ever
Exactly.
ask about flooding episodes or anything like that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah,
For
I
sure.
always ask.
Because
Like
that's
we
a
always
big
ask
thing.
the big questions, like when was your roof changed, electrical, plumbing, windows, like any big ticket items for sure. We want to know, like, what have you done to the property since you bought it?
Yeah.
And if it's a raw space and there's no, like, you can kind of smell like if
Yeah,
it's
what's going on.
what's
Yeah.
a moist basement. Like we've
Yeah.
been in so many houses now that your nose, you can smell it.
What's
you can
going
smell animals. You can
Yeah,
smell
you
smoking.
can definitely
you
smell
can-
cats.
You can
like smoke,
Everything.
Like,
just with
telltale.
experience. Just like there's so many things you walk in and you just notice with it just because you've done it. You've walked into so many houses.
Yeah.
And yeah, but some people don't do the due diligence.
No, but a lot of cases now are flooding and fires. Fire cases are on the rise like you would not believe.
Interesting.
Really?
Oh, well, like with like developments.
Well, developments and also homes, right? Between shoddy electrical work,
oh, I see.
right? And also developments, going up in flames.
How do people
Like what? Can you give us an example of a situation that you've come across?
Well, both. Well, there's situations where there's electrical defect that you couldn't see upon inspection, right? And then that obviously, the insurance companies get involved because we're talking about fire, and the problem with fire is that when you put it out, there's more water damage than the initial fire causes.
Right.
And then there is this whole scenario in certain pockets of the GTA where there are developments going up in smoke. For reasons that I'm sure everybody can, guess.
Do you feel like because construction costs has gone up so much that people are cutting corners more?
100%.
And that's what's
But I
causing
think we've seen that in
problems?
the city for a long time.
Yeah.
It takes even a layperson to just walk around the city look at high-rise residential condos,
Oh, yeah.
and especially high-rise residential condos. They are not built the same way they were
Yes,
10
that's
years
true.
ago.
Yeah.
You look at the site, you look at the crew, you look at the materials, you look at even the organization of the work. And what's that driven by?
Money.
Costs. And also, you have certain workers on there that are just fulfilling the union's need to get certain laborers there, and no one cares.
Yeah.
And
And are they even trained properly?
No.
I heard there was like such a big like exodus of
But high-rise residential condos, disaster.
Yeah.
And they won't like there are buildings in this city that have stood without issue for 50 years,
Yeah.
solid like
Yeah.
a rock. Those days are gone.
Yeah.
Those days are gone. The condos that are being built now, unless you're paying, some of the smaller boutique boutique condos where they're like $2,000, $2,400 a square foot, but the typical cookie cutter condos,
Yeah.
I give them 6 to 8 years, but before things start happening, windows.
Special assessments. I was just having this
Yeah.
conversation with another builder, and he was saying the same thing. Like, we were downtown having a coffee, and he was looking at a building right across from us, and he's like, in 2 years, that building's going to start having problems just by looking at
you
it.
can just look. You don't even have to be in the business of it. You can just look.
Yeah.
And
Scary.
I don't know
There's so many that were built. It's so scary.
So what's going to happen with these high rises? Like, what's going to happen?
And that's something that's going to develop over time, right? Like, where's the insurance? Will insurance be in place? Will the developer need to be, implicated? Will the builder need to be implicated? How about the subtrades that are involved?
How can the developer be implicated after the 7 years is up?
Well,
Like,
you don't know, right? And not only that, a lot of these companies come and go. They just declare,
yeah.
declare bankruptcy and they open up another.
like the club scene.
100%.
well, it's like the couple buildings that we've like even the car lot like it had like something with the parking lot. For years it was going on, and the residents were suing the builder.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Yeah, or there was another building that I had done work in, and it wasn't green enough. It was a green building, and they were suing the building because they didn't make it like it was a green efficient building. So you can't. They do sue them afterwards, but it takes a really
It's
long
long.
time.
It takes a while. It takes a while. Like we've had some issues with major foundation work and water and things like that. But there is recourse. They just need to be around still.
Yeah.
The problem is Look at the companies that are being used. You know, but you guys have dealt with companies that are, you know, they have a reputation.
You have to do your
You have
due
to do
diligence
due
again.
diligence,
Yeah.
right?
Because even if you're in a condo that's suing the builder, that doesn't look good to a new buyer either, and it decreases the value of that condo anyway.
Yeah.
If that's your
Like,
investment.
I have a friend that purchased a condo a couple of years ago, crazy expensive, right? Boutique condo, you name it. You know, it has the whole like drive in with your car, elevator. You think for that kind of money, problems. There's even a lien against the common areas in the condo
Oh, wow.
because the builder is in arrears to all his subtrades.
Oh yeah, I've seen
And then
that.
what happens?
Well, what happens? You just spent like $4 million on a condo, and you have more issues than, you know, the guy that spent $500,000 in Liberty Village.
Right. Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, well, who sold you this? Like, did they not know? And there was a history with this builder.
Oh wow.
There was a history with this builder. You know, just because it looks great, you know, you almost want to give advice.
Yeah.
You know, you want to, like I said, it comes back to you're selling someone the most important asset in their life, right? Like give them, other than just making it transactional, form a relationship with them.
Absolutely,
And that's what it's about. I form relationships with my clients. Some of them become my friends.
Yeah.
And I think that that's what's important is you want somebody that knows their stuff, but also is taking this on their heart. They know
Yes.
how important this transaction is for you,
Yeah.
right? So it's results driven, right? But for both involved in the transaction.
And
Yeah.
they
For
care.
you and for them.
They
and they
care.
care.
Yeah.
Like when something doesn't go right with me from a transaction, I get upset.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I'm like, what is, and I will do whatever I can to fix it.
Yeah.
A lot of
Well,
people-
we've had many, many, many sleepless nights for our clients.
Oh yeah.
Because you just, you know.
We've talked our
do you
clients
think I'm
out of
wearing
deals.
sunglasses?
That's why we're all drinking coffee. Yeah. Right. My day still kicking in today. Right. But that's just it. You know.
Yeah, like how many times have we been through it where we've, you know, we advise our clients not to buy property.
It's as if we're doing it for ourselves.
You're the bad guy. Yeah. You're the bad guy.
Well, we don't want to be the bad guy.
Yeah.
And plus, most
No,
of
I
our
don't think
clients
we're
are
really ever the bad guy.
We keep our clients.
Yeah.
We keep our clients. Like I have clients from 20 years ago from
Well,
when
and
I
that's
started.
a big thing, right? Like it's
Yeah.
retention. Like,
Yeah.
you know, because it's not an industry where people come back. But if they do come back, that says something about, you know, it's results driven. So it works.
Yeah, and that's
Right.
why referrals matter.
Oh,
right?
100%. So as much as it's a very difficult, like in my industry right now, it's a very difficult time. You know, everybody wants more work, more product, but they want it at a cheaper price. Well, and then expenses are blowing up.
Yeah.
Like, and it's a balance, which means, you know, how do we get through this? But there is, you know, I do think that there's light at the tunnel for many industries because I think that once we get through these difficult times of just like working away, that when the dust settles, it'll come back to, you know, your basics, common sense, relationships, and good work actually gets you somewhere.
That's where I think it's going to matter for all of us is building your relationships right now. Like it's finally coming back around where that matters. Like
Oh,
before
100%.
it was everybody just wanted to press a button, like AI, like everything's
Yeah,
being
well,
taken
AI
over.
has its challenges, right? It's
Yeah,
gonna
but
be
there's
like
so
the
many
internet.
people moving towards AI. But I think the frustration is going to come where you just want to speak to a person.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, in law, you know, there's some backlash because a lot of people are preparing answers using AI, and they're all made up. They sound great. It sounds like an A+ paper, but these are made up cases. And
What do you mean?
like they'll generate a memo on latent defects or coverage issues, and it's like a prepared memo. You know, you could submit it to. They make up cases. It's all made up.
Oh wow.
Just like how they can make up
That's a bit scary.
person. No, but
Everything's made
everything's
up.
made
Yeah.
up. But I think you know, at the end of the day, you want to meet with someone
Yeah.
face to face. So you know, litigation. What are you going to do? Bring a robot to court? Like you need somebody to speak on your behalf,
Yeah.
right? And the same with you guys. At the end of the day, while the front work can be done by AI, you know, collecting data, you know, analytics,
Yeah.
things like that. But at the end of the day, when it comes to handshake, you need a handshake. You don't need a
Yeah.
computer.
Yeah,
Well, and negotiations, you can't do
Yeah.
that with AI.
No.
I'm sorry.
it's a plus. It's a tool,
Yeah.
right? It's a tool that you can use for things that you know it can handle,
Yeah.
but it's not going to replace what we have to do. Like that human.
You're
That's the
specialized.
It's the human
challenge.
factors.
Yeah.
It's measuring the temperature in the room,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Computer can't do that, or maybe they can, but
well,
you know,
we
who
don't know
knows?
about it yet.
Who
Do you
knows?
mean like emotional temperature or like actual physical temperature?
You know, but like your
Yeah.
tolerance for risk.
Yes, exactly.
Your tolerance for risk. They may be able to collect that data, but unless you're right then and there, how can
there's so many variables too.
Exactly.
Right.
You
And
know?
I think both of our industries are pretty similar that way because you're not just dealing with one thing happening. You're dealing with a whole gamut of things that you have to kind of balance and put together and figure out what makes more sense and what's a priority. And, it needs the human touch to be able to do that, I believe.
Yeah.
Well, especially in our industry too, like it's very, very personal.
Yeah, you're dealing with
people's
emotions.
Emotions, their
High emotions.
finances.
Oh, yeah.
Somebody might have passed away. It's a divorce. Like there's a sensitive touch that needs to go with that.
And I don't know about you guys, but I'm noticing these days people are a lot more like mental health is an issue. And I'm not saying people are crazy. I'm just saying like people are struggling.
Are you sure about that?
Well, some are, but I'm just saying people are really, really struggling. And I think we all need that extra support right now. We all need, that connection to others at this point, I believe.
Well, I think it's front and center.
Yeah.
I mean, I've seen it in my
Yeah.
office. I joke, and I probably shouldn't joke, but I do anyway. During
Humor's
COVID.
good.
No, but during COVID, I really should have gone out and got a psychology degree
Yeah.
to be a therapist
Yep.
because I found myself really sitting down with people and talking them through their day.
Welcome
Because-
to our world.
Yeah, that's pretty much what we do
and
on a
I'm
daily
thinking,
basis.
Wow, and but you're right. Like mental health is a huge part of any transaction now. You have to be very aware, and also being very aware of issues. People want to know where you stand on so many issues, and it becomes almost too personal. It almost crosses boundaries that we've never gotten into before. Like allegiances to certain things. And I'm thinking, whatever happened to just doing work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you're right. It's part of it now.
It
I
is
think
a
it
part of
always
it.
has been part of it, but now it's up front and center.
It is.
We've
It's
talked about this too. Like,
Listen.
what do you do when somebody isn't doing their job? What can you do about it? It's really difficult because, first of all, you can't replace them. You have a really hard time finding good people that were actually going to do their job. And then are they going to complain because you've complained about their work?
Yeah, it's a juggling act. A lot of employers will say we can't say anything anymore, and to some extent, that's true.
Yeah.
To some
I think
extent, it's true.
accountability is really important too, because I feel like who was saying it about the people pleasing, right? You can't do that like with the family. You can't do that anymore.
No.
You have to have accountability, but also, ask people to take accountability
Yeah.
because as a professional, you should be ready to do that. And if they're not doing their job, then you need to let them know or ask questions. Don't just trust that they're going to do it and just blindly trust people to do what they're supposed to do because sometimes your perspective could be different than the other person.
100%. It's context, but I do think
And
that
communication.
the last few years have allowed a level of mediocrity to become the norm.
Absolutely.
Like our government?
Yes.
Well, I think yeah.
Sorry.
No. I believe
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
As much as I'm one that I'm not, but I really think that our government,
Yeah.
and in every level of government, allowed a level of mediocrity to be the norm,
Yeah.
and say it's okay to be mediocre.
they've lowered
Made
the
us all
bar.
stay home.
There's no bar.
They're all like,
Yeah, they've
just
lowered
stay
the
home, just,
expectations.
like they made us all
Do
feel.
the bare minimum.
Yeah.
Don't worry about it being
It
accountable.
was disempowering in a sense because you didn't know what to do. You didn't have any power and you were just basically reliant on whatever information you were given
But they made
Absolutely.
it okay for you to do nothing.
to be passive.
Well, there's
Yeah,
no motivation in the
exactly.
city, and it actually what it did is it, I think, has negatively impacted entrepreneurship in
Absolutely.
Canada,
Yeah.
particularly in the GTA. You're actually penalized for being one that wants to motivate and to build something.
Yeah.
Because if you impose upon anybody to elevate themselves, you're actually putting stress on them. Like that's a bad thing.
Yeah.
Right? Like encouraging, motivating, putting pressure on a 28-year-old
because everybody should
or
get a
30-year-old is
participation
a
ribbon.
problem. Like I'll give you a perfect example. I recently had a young woman reach out to me through a friend because she was looking for a job as a lawyer. And for 2 weeks, she talked my ear off. She sounded great on the phone. And, she said, I'm engaged. I bought a new house. I have all these expenses. I got my degree in London. I'm come back here. I did my equivalency.
Was that the example?
Yeah.
Go to London?
No, but that's fine. Like, like, listen, there's a lot of, but whatever, access, whatever, sometimes our schools are full, who knows? And I thought, okay, I'll do what I can. We're not looking for anyone right now, but I'll, keep you in mind. And she finally gets an interview at a firm that I deal with. they're pretty good. I said, great, let me know how it goes. She goes, can you give me any pointers for the interview when I go face to face? And I was having one of those days where I was just like, me, if I'm a straight shooter one day, I just give it to you. Like, if you don't like it, too bad. And I said, well, you know what? You've been great with me on the phone. Just don't make it just about law. Right? Like, I want to be able to know that I can have a coffee with you, or I can have a drink with you, or you're normal. Like, you're not just about book smarts. Like, have some common sense. Yeah. I said, and you've shown, you're pretty good, come from a good
social
family.
intelligence.
And I said, the other thing is, because I'm thinking she's like 28 years old, right? And I said, when you get there, like, just don't ask about like work-life balance, right? And like, how many days can you work from home?
Yeah.
Right? She calls me, she goes, oh my God, thank you so much. Because, I was actually that was going to be one of my first questions. And in my head, I'm thinking, are you kidding me? You just told me you're looking for a job, you're freaking out, you have all these expensive, and your first question or second to a potential employer is
how much time are you going to have off?
What's my work-life balance? I was this close, I kid you not, to saying to her, guess what? Until you're 40 or 50, you don't have the right to say, what's my work-life balance? Like, work. You just spent all these years in school to get a degree. And now you want to know when you can relax?
Yeah.
Like, then don't waste someone else's opportunity.
Getting going.
Yeah, right? Like, exactly. Get going. And my thing is, like, we all have to have other things on the go. We all do here, right? But you got to work.
Yeah.
Right. And if you don't want to, be honest. But what I'm finding is a lot of people are not honest. They just want to get in there and then take a seat back. And that's the problem. But
they still want to be paid. They want to be paid full.
They want to get paid what I'm getting paid.
Yes.
Yeah. Right? Because they're, and...
we see that. I mean, we've been building a team for a while. And that's kind of the things. Like, they just expect to walk in and then they're just going to be like us.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, but it's demanding. Like, they're like, okay, well, I want to have all these things, and we're like, but we pay for all of these things, and plus we have to put in a certain amount of time to build our database and our relationship with our clients.
Yeah. People don't see what they're getting; they only see what they want, right? They don't actually see like this is my opportunity here. This is what I have to do, and I still have to work hard to get there. Because when you see that, you get, like, for example, if somebody is working hard and I see it, then I want to give them more.
Well,
but if they're being entitled and they're expecting that they're going to get more than what they've even worked for yet, that doesn't give me the feeling of wanting to give them more.
But I think there's going to be a turnaround. I think in 2 or 3 years, when things get, the dust settles and there's more expenses, I think a lot of employers are going to have figured out how to work with less.
Yeah.
Earn less, because that's the reality of the situation. And those jobs are not going to be there anymore, because guess what? We figured out how to work more with less.
Yeah.
We're okay making less. And now that job that you thought you had guaranteed.
Yeah.
And you were leveraging through the last 4 years, particularly during COVID, it's not there anymore.
It's going to be
bye-bye.
Yeah.
Bye-bye. And people are not, people are forgetting that, the biggest industries that are being cut right now is tech. Like the tech world, there's massive, unemployment now. And those people are smart people. They're going to get into those other industries that they weren't trained in. They're going to fill up those positions.
Yeah.
So people have been sitting comfortable, not leveraging their employers just for showing up.
Yeah.
Those days are going to be gone in 2 years.
The dust hasn't even settled yet.
Oh, no.
It's not even close.
Wait till 2025 hits.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, how many layoffs have you heard about in the last like 6 months?
Oh, tons.
Like,
Yeah, me
massive.
too. I've been hearing lots.
Well,
of
and not only that, coinciding with your industry, obviously, a lot of mortgages are going to be due in 2025.
Yeah.
And now it's already started.
Yeah, it's starting.
We've already
And
started
people
to get those calls.
people are being very selective about jobs. So I'm thinking, you may want to pick up more hours. Never mind, be selective about work.
I don't think reality is set in yet.
No.
Everybody's still trying to hang on, maxing out their credit cards.
But it goes back to this like mediocrity is okay.
And it's also our society just encourages people to numb, distract, la, nothing's really happening.
Yeah.
You need to wake up and open your eyes.
Yeah, but no one wants that, right?
Yeah.
No one wants that.
But that's the whole idea of people being okay with, we're promoting the idea that it's okay to be mentally not well, but you can tell everybody. I'm going to tell everybody that I'm not well, and you have to just accept it, and I don't have to do anything about it.
But it's been encouraged. And then the people that really need help, they get lost.
Yeah.
They get lost. And, I also blame every aspect of that, because there are doctors, there are treatment providers that have promoted that.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, our doctors, unfortunately, are overworked and underpaid.
100%.
I hate to say that,
but like every industry, there's good and there's bad.
Yeah.
Right? lawyers
are
good
being-
and bad.
people
But we
are
don't,
being
we don't
Doctors
take
good
care,
and
we
bad.
don't take care of our doctors here. We don't.
Well,
They're
no.
leaving. They're leaving the country because they're getting better pay in the States or anywhere else, and they're just like, I don't want to deal with this anymore. I got 15 minutes to diagnose a patient, and you're going to misdiagnose them.
It's a
Well,
broken.
it's the admin, right?
It's
Like
a
I've
broken
talked to my
system.
I've talked to my doctor, and he says, unfortunately, he wants to treat more people, but there's such an administrative aspect to his day
Yeah.
that it prevents him from seeing more patients. Right? They get paid okay. Should they be getting paid more? Do I think nurses should get paid more? 100%.
Yeah.
I think it's disgusting what
I
nurses
agree,
get paid.
definitely.
It's disgusting. Like I see sometimes what they get paid because in my line of work I see a lot of financials, and I'm thinking this is what a nurse gets paid.
And they're working doubles.
Well, not
on a
only
regular
not only that,
basis.
but what they do. Like, let's talk about what they do. They do
I could
everything.
never be a nurse.
Yeah.
They do everything. Like, I'm talking from a PSW right up to a registered nurse, a step-up nurse. Like, but yet we're willing to reward, a marketing executive or an athlete more.
The idea is just to get by, right? It's a broken system that nobody really is interested in fixing. It's like as long as we make money, we just get by, misdiagnosing people, and it's just like, where does it begin and where does it end?
No.
And what's the answer?
Like
Our
having-
society has misplaced our values pretty much. We don't regard our teachers and our doctors and our nurses as people that are important enough.
But that's
to get
not
paid.
unique to Canada. Like it's
Yeah.
No, I
unique.
know.
It's everywhere, right?
everywhere.
It's everywhere. Like teachers in the States get paid like 20 grand, 30 grand with no benefits.
that's
So
actually
we have
frightening.
to be advocates, right? Like when I say we, I mean the people, the patients, the moms, the dads, the people
Yeah.
who are not getting the service that they're hoping to get. We have to be advocates and we have to ask for more, because if we don't, we're just going to keep receiving whatever is there.
Yeah,
right.
like I've been lucky in the system with my family, and we've talked about this, and part of it is just having the right doctors, and part of it is also being aware, and also how you present yourself.
Yes, absolutely.
Right? But it's there's so many people to blame in the system, but I think that you're right. The dust has not settled.
No, and
The
how many
dust is not
doctors have
settled.
actually retired? I mean, I'm going through this right now. My doctor retired
Yeah,
last year.
mine is
really?
retiring.
Yeah. So, I mean, so then what? You don't have a family doctor anymore unless somebody's replaced them, and then, they don't know you anymore. They don't know your history.
No.
So what do you do? Like
Go to a naturopath. Just kidding.
Yeah.
I mean, yes, I do that. But, if you have like a serious illness.
Oh, you need to go to a doctor.
You do need
Yeah.
to go to a doctor.
Yeah, you need a doctor. You need
Or at least multiple, right?
Well,
like,
balance.
like a holistic
Yeah.
kind of approach is what we do.
yeah. Like a
Is
balance.
that stuff that you deal with as well? Do you find yourself dealing with any kind of litigation in the health industry?
Oh, absolutely. Like we deal with
I would imagine.
we deal with a lot of prescription error cases.
Okay.
We deal with medical mal.
Right.
Canada's pretty good. Like our checks and balances, as much as to some extent those checks and balances hinder research, because a lot of people will say there's so much red tape that we don't get to these other things.
Right.
So there's a con to that, because we are slower in getting things pumped out. But at the same time, there's a lot of checks and balances where a lot of the mistakes that happen in the States, it's not even possible here because the red tape. In the States, it's kind of a free for all. So things happen there where you're like, it would have never even gotten through stage one. Here, but like I said, there's pros and cons to that,
Yeah.
because to some extent it hinders a lot of research and development.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But there are, we deal with a lot of prescription error cases, medical mal situations. So that happens quite often.
Yeah, medical mal, like with prescriptions, like they overprescribe to somebody.
Over prescription, the wrong prescription, things like that. Yeah, yeah. And things, sometimes, taking the wrong pill doesn't do much. And sometimes taking the wrong pill can do a lot.
Yeah, that's true.
That's very
Right?
true.
Like, oh yeah, like big time, but that's, and people are popping pills left, right, and center now.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, there's
That's
a pill
what I
for
mean.
everything. But then you take one pill and it causes problems. So they're like, well, take this pill to fix the problems that pill caused.
Yeah.
And then it's just a domino effect from there.
Well,
and
I
how many,
watched
how
that-
many times do you see people with these pill boxes that are just like, they've got, 15 pills a day?
Well, and why does that happen, right? Like you got to look at the pharmaceutical companies, right? Their role in society.
Yeah, well, it's big.
Don't
That's
even
a whole
get
other
started
thing.
on that.
That's a whole.
It's
That's
big
a whole.
business.
It's probably the biggest business,
Yeah,
right? It's not just big.
absolutely.
It is actually the biggest business, and there's no getting away from it.
This has been a big discussion for us, for sure. Because
Yeah.
how many lobbyists are from pharmaceutical
Well,
companies?
the most important ones,
Yeah.
right? and
And how do they affect government? And how do they
Well, they
affect all the
pay for it all.
decisions?
Yep.
Well, look, and here, like, there's an example of it, but in the States, it drives everything, right?
Yeah.
Because in the States, it's a very different way of promoting, the party. But the lobby groups there are, pharmaceutical companies are the top ones.
Yeah.
They own everything.
That's what people don't understand. Like, don't believe everything you hear.
I feel like going into the last 4 years, I was naive into thinking just how evil or how like people only are only looking out for themselves, like these pharmaceutical companies. And going through the last 4 years, I realized that people actually will do that to you. They will ruin your whole life just for their greater gain. And I
Nobody wanted to believe that. They wanted to think that,
didn't want to
these
believe
guys are
that.
there to make me feel better. They want to make sure that I'm okay.
What still blows
It's a
my
business,
mind
right?
is those commercials where they're like, "Oh, this is such a great drug," except for all these side
All the
effects.
disclaimers at the end.
But that's
I'm
always
is
been
this
the case,
is
right?
this real? Like, this is a joke.
But that's always been the case. And like, we don't even look at the last 4 years. Like, if you look at the whole epidemic with respect to Perks and Oxy, that's the best example.
I was going to say that. Yeah, I've had people that I know that were personally affected by that, addictions and suicide. It's really bad.
In the States, it became big business for doctors.
Oh yeah,
It's very, very
Because
bad for
they
military.
actually had clinics that were open 24/7.
Wow.
Yeah.
prescribing
Pain meds, because for every pain med they were getting kickbacks, and we're talking millions of dollars.
There's this
Wow.
documentary, or not a documentary.
happens here, too.
It was
Yeah.
it was like a series on Netflix, and they
think I
talked.
saw it.
Yeah, it opened my eyes.
pretty scary.
It was so scary.
Which one?
I can't remember the name of it.
But I'll send
Yeah,
it to you.
It
You
was
should plug
really
it.
good.
Basically, in the middle of the night, showing this like female GP basically having a line out, to the parking lot in a strip mall, just giving out perks.
Yeah.
Wow.
And how they would hire like university students, like good-looking women, to go and flirt with the doctors, so they make go and make sure that they fulfill their quota on prescribing these.
That's why
meds.
now they're going out of business because they've been
never
sued,
heard
right?
of
There's
this.
class action
Yeah.
things, because they knew fully well that it was an addictive drug.
Yes.
But I don't think they care. Like, I know some people in the military, and what they're doing to the people in the military is horrific.
What are they doing to the military here? Do we even have a military in Canada?
Well, what's left of it. They prescribe them sleeping pills, which you shouldn't have for more than 6 months, maybe at a time. And I know somebody who was on them for 15 years, and they just keep prescribing them to
But
them.
who's prescribing them?
The doctor, the military doctor. This is okay. We'll just numb you for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
to handle
Doesn't
his
matter.
sleeping, to be able to sleep.
Yeah,
of the
because you've got PTSD and all the other shit
So
that
how
you
do you
do.
instead of
function, though?
dealing with the actual problem,
source,
you
yeah.
just put a Band-Aid on it.
Like,
As long as they're
but
doing what
imagine
they're
how many
supposed to
people they're
do.
doing that too. And then these guys are all on medical release, and we're paying for them to be on medical
they
release
all
to
go
do nothing. They're doing literally nothing, but we're paying them $75,000 a year.
Yeah.
And that's just one little piece of what we're paying
we don't even
for.
know.
That's
We don't
all
even
society
know.
now,
Yeah.
right? Like,
Yeah.
we've become
Everywhere.
a society of zombies.
On that note,
Thank you for tuning into the Real Agent.
We're real.
Yeah.
let's end on a positive note here.
Yeah.
Why did I want to ask you, what made you become what drove you to become a lawyer?
Well, I have an uncle that I have always looked up to. He's always been a lawyer, but I wanted a good way of living. Like, that was, and I will say, like, I just it was what I fell into. I looked up to my uncle, and listen, I came back from a traditional. Well, I wouldn't say my family's traditional, but work hard, and back then, when I went to school, you became a professional, which was unfortunate because there were so many industries that were discouraged, like the trades. But I enjoyed it. I had a great time, and I've stayed with the firm. I've been at my firm, which is a rarity, for so many years because of the people. The
that's
job is the
amazing.
job. It is.
Yeah.
It is a job. People are like, oh, I'm like, it's nothing. Listen, I'm not saving babies. I'm not helping puppies. It's it's it's
You
provided,
might be.
right? Who knows? Exactly. I've
ripple
helped out a couple of vets, but it was basically just. I looked up to my uncle. I fell into it. I excelled at it, and I enjoy the people that I work with, and I like dealing with people.
Yeah.
You've made it something that you love
Yeah.
because of the relationships that you've built,
Yeah.
and you focus on what part of it that you really enjoy.
Yeah, and I've always been very honest about its limitations, and I've always just been very aware of where I came from, and just respectful of everyone around me. And I never thought it was anything that would put me in a different category than the guy next to me. The guy, that's for me. I was always very aware of that because I grew up where the guy that just worked hard and may not have had those degrees beside his name was probably just as successful or better than me. And what I used to find very early on, because I think we're all a good judge of characters, when I was in law school and I turned around here or there weren't a lot of people that I liked because they were little shits.
Yeah.
And it's about being able to judge character, and that isn't a mark that's determined by your vocation.
Yeah,
but
or
I
it shouldn't
think
be.
I think your characters, that you can be loyal and trustworthy and work with people. And for me, law allowed me to work with a lot of different people, but also realize the people that I want to hang out with and the people that you got to kind of keep your eye on.
What this makes me think of is it's not necessarily about what you're doing.
Yeah.
It's about who you are.
Yeah.
And who you can be while doing what you're doing.
Well, that's just it.
That's huge.
Yeah.
That's actually,
That's my thing. It's like, I'm a lawyer, but I like working with my clients.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I actually enjoy
and solving
dealing with
problems
them. Yeah.
and making things actually work in their favor.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
and that-
helping. That's
Yeah.
like us.
So people
Do
will
we
often
do
say,
we enjoy selling houses? I mean, I like houses.
Yeah.
But it's what really lights me up is when I'm helping
Dealing with
somebody.
people.
Or
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
the
we
people, the
fixed a problem.
relationships.
In many cases, it's fixing a problem.
Oh, it's
that's
the
just
best.
it,
That's
right?
the funnest part.
yeah. And people say, well, how do you know that you've done your job? And I said, well, when I'm at a mediation, I said, if you start talking about cases and the law, you've lost.
Absolutely.
It's about telling a story, right? And I go, when I've won, and it's really about minimizing risk, right? It's about like not paying out what you have to. I said, it's when I'm on the other side and I can tell the other person on the other side is looking at me saying, I want her to be my lawyer next time.
Yes,
That's when I know I've done my
exactly.
job.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Right? So
love that.
that's pretty much it.
I love
I
that.
love that.
Yay.
Yeah.
That's a perfect way to end.
Thank you. All right, guys. Thanks for tuning in.
Thank you.
And thanks, Deanna, for being here. And don't forget to like,